Welcome to Sound of Resistance channel. Ukraine echoes all its regions with the sound of shelling. The Russian occupation in Ukraine does not end. The conflicts between the Ukrainian and Russian army, which continue in all regions of Ukraine, continue to get tougher with each passing day. Before winter comes in Ukraine, the parties are playing their last trump card. With the onset of winter and the harsh weather conditions, the conflict in Ukraine is expected to slow down for a while. Hot news continues to come from the south of Ukraine. Immediately after Russia announced that it would withdraw Russian soldiers from Kherson, active hours began to be experienced in the region. Ukrainian fighters set out with large convoys of vehicles towards Kherson. While the Ukrainian army continues its rapid advance to Kherson, the Ukrainian authorities stated that they are cautious against the possible Russian trap and the Ukrainian soldiers are firmly on the ground. The decision of the Russian soldiers to withdraw from Kherson almost confused Russia. While the Kremlin had already turned against Putin for its failure in Ukraine, they were angered by the news of the recent withdrawal. The Kremlin says that Putin should be removed from the seat immediately, and that this decision should be implemented before it does more harm to Russia. Some pro-Putin deputies, on the other hand, say that the decision to withdraw Russian soldiers from Kherson was taken just in time and a possible disaster was averted. According to the commander-in-chief of the Russian army who announced the decision to withdraw the Russian soldiers from Kherson, it was not an arbitrary decision to withdraw the Russian soldiers from Kherson, but a mandatory decision. The moral and motivation of the Russian soldiers in the region were not enough to resist the Ukrainian soldiers. And also the Ukrainian army, Kherson, he stated that he bombed all the aid routes reaching and that no aid reached the region in any way. The Ukrainian army advancing towards its great goal. The main purpose of the Ukrainian President Zelensky desire to take Kherson back so badly is return to the lands of Crimea, which he has longed for since 2014. If the Ukrainian army achieves full dominance in Kherson in the south of the country, they will be one step closer to the freedom of Crimea. The Russian military has been warned that the heroic strategy of counterattack from Ukraine during the war could leave Russia on track to lose Crimea within months. Russian hopes of victory were shaken when the Kerch bridge between Crimea and Russia was shaken by a massive explosion that collapsed part of the structure. Crimea is home to Russia's Black Sea Fleet and numerous military airports and bases, and is also critical to the operational and logistical support of Russia's southern front in Ukraine. The Russian military has said it will withdraw its troops from Kherson, the only Ukrainian regional capital it has captured and a getaway to Crimea. If the evacuation of Russian troops from Kherson does occur, it will mark one of Russia's worst failure in the 9 months of war. Retired US Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who served as the commanding general in the US Army Europe, said that Ukraine's massive counteroffensive against Russia in September is already showing significant signs of success. Retired US Lieutenant General Ben Hodges announced that if this pace continues, Ukrainian troops could push the Russians back to the February 23 line by the end of the year and liberate Crimea by next summer. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges said, if you are imagining a map of Ukraine, think of this counterattack that started in early September. It has two wings. The first is the one coming from the west across Kherson in the south. The other is the one that baffles the Russians who are finally moving south towards Mariupol, in my opinion. All roads lead to Crimea, so when the Ukrainian army goes under areas like Kherson and Melitopol, they will have a high margin range when they start hitting Russian bases and facilities in Crimea. When the Ukrainian soldiers manage to do this, the Crimea will become untenable, which is why the attack on the Kerch bridge was such a significant attack, no matter who was responsible. If this logistic network is cut again or cannot be adequately repaired, we can talk about a large number of Russians in Crimea who find themselves in a sack, he said. Russia had long wanted to hold Kherson and other positions west of the Dnieper, thereby attacking other regions and cutting off Ukraine's access to the Black Sea. This will open a huge hole in the Ukraine's economy and enable Russia to build a land corridor into the separatist Transnistria region of Moldova, which is home to a major Russian military base. But Kherson's loss could have devastating consequences for Putin and add to the criticism of Russia's military failures during the war, a drop in troop morale and stronger position to his lousy troop mobilization. Russian troops were forced to withdraw from the key southern city of Kherson after the occupied area was threatened by an advancing Ukrainian counteroffensive. Kremlin military leaders announced plans for Russian troops to evacuate the city after sabotage to supply lines made it increasingly difficult to equip troops in Kherson. As Russian forces retreated, Vladimir Putin's long-standing winning reputation was jeopardized, putting his power over Moscow in danger. Former National Security Advisor Sir Mark Lyell-Grant warned that withdrawing from Kherson could cast doubt on President Putin's leadership in Russia. Former National Security Advisor oligarch around President Putin will have seen the truth. And I think Putin's reputation as a tough guy and winner has definitely taken a big hit, Troves, he added. Despite Russia saying it would withdraw its troops from Kherson, Ukraine remains skeptical that this could be a ploy to lure the country's forces into a deadly trap, with an expert's warning. Ukrainian authorities were wary of treating the announced plan to withdraw from the city and nearby areas as a done deal. President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that the Russians may be faking a withdrawal from Kherson to draw the Ukrainian army into an established war. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the presidency of Ukraine, said, "So far, we do not see any sign that Russia has completely abandoned the city of Kherson, which means that these statements may be disinformation." Yaroslav Yanushevich, the Ukrainian appointed governor of Kherson, urged residents not to get too excited yet. After the announcement of withdrawal plan in Kherson, the Russian army's warnings to Ukraine are incessant. Military analyst Oleg Zdanov warned that the Russian declared retreat could be an ambush and a Russian trap to force the Ukrainians to attack, forcing them to penetrate the Russian defenses and respond to attack with a powerful blow from the flanks. While the Ukrainian army is reviewing its plans for Kherson, they continue their operations to clear Russian invaders in other parts of the country. Ukrainian forces bombarded a number of key targets and devastated Russian forces during the offensive. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian forces struck 2 Russian command posts and killed more than 80 Russian soldiers. It was reported that 2 Russian helicopters and many land vehicles were also destroyed in the attacks carried out by the Ukrainian army. The General Staff said the Energodar struck a Russian checkpoint in the area of the city, more than 50 invaders were killed and more than 40 injured. The Ka-52 helicopter belonging to the Russian army was also destroyed. Energodar is a city near the occupied nuclear weapon plant in Zaporizhia that became a flashpoint early in the conflict, prompting fears of a nuclear disaster. It was reported that Ukraine also hit a Russian headquarters in the Kherson region. More than 30 Russian soldiers were killed and 2 tanks and 4 trucks were destroyed. An Mi-8 Russian helicopter was also shot down in the attack of the Ukrainian army on the Russian headquarters. Ukrainian planes bombed 5 key military targets and artillery struck 2 ammunition depots. It looks like the Ukrainian army will continue to remove all obstacles until it reaches its main target, Crimea. The Russian army sleeps with its eyes open in Crimea, in case of an attack by Ukrainian soldiers. Russia has deployed thousands of its soldiers in the region for the security of Crimea. The Ukrainian warriors has accomplished much that has seemed impossible since the beginning of the Russian invasion. Can the same be said for the next target of the Ukrainian army? Time will tell us the answer to this question. Thank you for watching us.